Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report in a company update from FireFox Gold, chatting with the chairman and co-founder Patrick Highsmith. Patrick and I are going to be recapping the initial results from the ongoing drill program at the Mustajärvi Gold Project in Finland in the Lapland Greenstone Gold Belt. The company is traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol FFOX, on the OTCQB under the symbol FFOXF, and the Frankfurt Exchange FIY. Now, Patrick, initial results here, 4 holes released. These are all step out holes from this east zone. I'll post figure 1 in the news release. We can see the southwesternly step outs. Hole 1 was actually your best hole, and that's the furthest step out away. That intersected 2 gold zones, one being almost 10 meters of just over 9 grams per ton gold, and just over 11 meters of little more than 7 grams per ton gold. Patrick, take us through this drill program. This is the largest drill program you've ever completed or undertaken at this project at 10,000 meters. The goal clearly to step out from this main zone. Now, hole 1, that's your longest step out, and it has the best results. So what's that showing you about the potential here?
Thanks, Corey. Good to be here talking about drilling at Mustajärvi, and the results have started off great. I mean, as you said, the first hole has intercepted 2 really nice intercepts, quite high in the hole. If you notice, those 2 intervals are shallower than 100 meters down hole. So what we're seeing there, Corey, it is a step out, as you pointed, some significant distance, about 280 meters southwest from the center of this east zone, which is just one of the lodes of gold that we've discovered at Mustajärvi, the easternmost, of course. But I will say that if you look back a couple of years, Corey, there was a hole over in this vicinity in 2023, 23MJ005, and we hit a bit of gold over there, like 4 meters of almost 6 grams, 7 meters of almost 5 grams, fairly shallow in that hole. But that was a little bit north of here. And when we surveyed this area to look for extensions and new targets, we ran electromagnetic surveys, Corey, to look at the continuation of the pyrite that goes with the gold here. Pyrite is conductive, so when you run an EM survey, an electromagnetic survey, you can often see those conductive rocks. And we got a big whopping fixed loop EM or FLEM anomaly in this area, and it was a little bit south, a little bit deeper than that hole that we drilled a few years ago. So this wasn't the first indication that there was a trend over here, but what it was thicker and considerably higher grade, and we basically undercut that, and it firmly establishes that southeastern flank of the east zone is continuing. And you can see that even the holes that we'll talk about in a minute, holes 2 through 4, also hit some nice gold along this more southerly trend. So we're kind of at the beginning of this program testing a geophysical anomaly that said, hey, this thing continues, so let's do a big step out and really test that solidly. And also let's see if this south flank of the east zone is continuing. And again, these results really support that. And just briefly to discuss hole 1, the geology of it, what we look for, Corey, is to get into these altered metasedimentary rocks, which host the mineralization at Mustajärvi. They're altered over generally large areas where we see some albite, some quartz, things like that. And when it gets localized with more intense alteration and more pyrite, we often see a combination of sort of a replacement style of mineralization where the rock sort of sucks up the pyrite and the gold over thicker widths, and punctuating through there some high grade veins. And we see both of those types of mineralization in this first interval. And the photo we show in the news release gives people a kind of an indication of what we see there, this sort of pinkish rock with pyrite in it and some black, which is the mineral tourmaline. And folks can see over a couple of core boxes there a nice run of consistently mineralized rock. And that's pretty typical of what we see at Mustajärvi. And I'll just say, we continue this hit rate, Corey. Every time we drill at Mustajärvi, we have averaged 79% of the time hitting significant gold in the holes. And in this case, of course, all 4 holes hit significant gold, as we showed in the table.
Patrick, just a quick comment then regarding this hole 1 and the 2 different zones of mineralization. Pretty similar in terms of length and grade, but they are about 10 meters apart as we're looking at that table one of the news release. Any insights on what these two zones of gold could be?
You know, we're in orogenic gold, Corey, and we geologists know that when we're in orogenic gold, that means structure. So what it means, Corey, and I've looked at the individual assays on this interval, and I'll be looking at the core in about a week as I'm traveling to Finland on the weekend. And I can tell you that in between, there's not a lot of gold in there. So what that's telling us is this is pretty structurally controlled. The favorable fabric for the gold is pretty intense over that first 9-meter run in the first interval, and then down below again in that 11-meter run. The structural preparation, the fracturing, Corey, is the biggest thing we're looking for. And that seems to have permeated these 10-meter, more or less, intervals. And in between, not much of that. More very, very thin indications of a bit of alteration, but nothing that carries significant gold yet. As you know, we've ripped into a few 15-meter, I think 120-meter intercept at Mustajärvi so far, but here we're getting them awful close. As you point out, we got two 10-meter runs separated by sort of about 10 meters. So we like that for being a thicker volume of mineralization and right on the cusp, perhaps, of being even thicker and more exciting runs. So we look forward to drilling more holes to offset this one.
So, Patrick, the other three holes in the news release, hole 2, 3, and 4, we can see those were drilled along a fence, kind of in between where hole 1, the step out was, and the main east zone here. Those hit some high grade over a bit more narrow of widths. Is this all tying into one system, though?
Yes, we believe so, Corey. If you look at the figure, and we hope the readers spend some time looking at that to sort of string those red and orange colors together in their minds, you can see that we had this core of high-grade mineralization up in the north. We call that the main zone, main part of this east zone. But along the south side, we'd only drilled a couple of holes there, Corey, further to the northeast, and they were deeper, and they hit this southern flank, we'll call it, of the east zone. It's parallel. It's striking northeast, not much data to support it yet. So we drilled this fence of holes, a little bit shallower, a little bit further to the southwest, and it did hit those gold zones again, both fairly high up in the hole and a couple of fairly deep ones. And if you extrapolate those red and orange, you'll see that they hit hole number 1. So we believe there is a parallel trend there. But I can tell you that, again, talking about orogenic gold, we expect there to be more faults in here that sort of chop things up, Corey. They won't be this continuous perfect slab of gold. I wish it were the case, but that probably won't be it. But the good news is when we get close to these crossing faults that also mineralize and juice up this rock, they control the plumbing, as I've discussed before with you. When we get close to those faults, that's when we get the really ripper high grade and thicker intercepts that Mustajärvi is known for. So what I would say about 2, 3, and 4 is that we hit a mixture of quite narrow, very high grade. You'll notice there was an intercept there of 0.9 meters of 104 grams. Very exciting to see, that kind of grade. But you'll also see a few meters of 4 meters of 18 grams. Really nice grade and width there in that hole. And that's typical of seeing these structurally controlled zones. They're running along with the trend. They're going to pinch and swell. And when we get to sort of hot spots right up against one of these faults, that's when we'll get kind of an explosion of grade and thickness. And that's always going to drive the really favorable economics of orogenic gold is where is that high grade? And establishing that the zone continues is very important because as readers can see when they look at that figure, there are very few holes in this whole south side of the deposit. So we're quite excited about it. And also I can tell you that gold is occurring at more or less 2 different depths. There's a higher up zone that we hit at only 77, 80 meters. Then there's a deeper zone from about 170, 178 meters and deeper. So 2 different levels, but they're all falling into line with that southern trend. And so part of the same system, yes, but more drilling required to bulk it out and to know whether it's the same body or whether, again, we pinch and swell. But nice to see the mixture of very, very high grade over narrow width, which is typical, and then the somewhat lower grade, but still good grade over thicker, greater thicknesses.
All right, Patrick, let's talk about the targeting that led you to especially drill this hole 1, but figure 2 shows some of the targeting results from that geophysical survey, from that fixed loop electromagnetic survey, the FLEM survey. This is what led to some of the early holes here, and we are still early on in this program, but talk us through figure two, what we're seeing in terms of the gray and the red areas here, how that will guide future drilling and even holes that you've already drilled that we're waiting assay results for.
Yeah, it's a great point, Corey. And you reflect on a couple of bad years in the junior market, as you know, even last year when we chose not to drill. But we did a bit of work in 2024 with geophysics, and we have the ability to execute these surveys at quite low cost because we have on-board talent and also kind of Magnus Minerals, the privately held company that is a sizable shareholder of Firefox, has its own team of technical people that we draw on to help us, including a top-notch geophysicist. And we applied this EM survey, kind of limited at first, Corey. We did downhole, where you actually put the electrodes downhole and generate the electrical field and measure conductors around the hole. And that's what you see with the gold color target and the red color plates on that figure. Those come from putting power into the ground in a hole and looking nearby the holes for more conductive rocks. And the gray come from laying out the power source on the surface and looking for conductors at depth. It wasn't a very big survey, but we were targeting areas that we believed were potentially fruitful. Down in the southwest, where MJ001 just announced, goes right through one of those targets and hits some great gold mineralization. And then on the upper right, you can see we're obviously thinking about that gray plate up there that strikes northwest. That may be one of those cross faults I was talking about, Corey, where you'd accumulate maybe a lot of pyrite along a structure, which could have a lot of gold with it. And that direction and that target is also not tested. So same for those red plates. They show us that nearby to previous drilling, but not quite in the hole, is an indication of more conductive rocks. Now, we've said all along that this program, which will be, probably over 10,000 meters when we're done, will be both infill drilling nearby to known mineralization and also testing new targets. And that's exactly how we're going to use the EM here, Corey. We love it when the geophysical tools work for us to make our targeting more straightforward. We always are basing this on geology. Where do we think the right rocks go? But remember, this whole part of Finland is covered by glacial sediments, so we rarely see outcrop. That means our geological information is limited. All the more reason to use electromagnetics like this. And you can see that these targets nearby to the known mineralization will obviously be something we're going to want to test. And right at this minute, we've actually got the crew on the ground augmenting these data with more electromagnetic data in this area, but we'll also be testing targets both to the southwest and well off to the east from here with this EM technique. This really was a great successful trial of this method, and it's really helped us combined with magnetics and a little bit of work we've previously done with induced polarization, or IP. Geophysics is really helping us here, and that's a tool, and we can apply it at low cost. And we look forward to following up on more of these targets as we lay out there in figure two.
So explain to me then, Patrick, because you're 15 holes through this program, 4 were in this news release. Where approximately are these 9 holes that have already been drilled? And where are you going to focus the rest of this program? Or are you simply waiting for this further targeting work?
We always hold some meters back to follow up on great holes along the way, Corey, as you suggest. And that we will have 2 rigs at some portions of this upcoming drill program. Right now, we've had 1, and it's moved off to drill at our Sarvi property for a while we crunch data. To answer your immediate question, we make a brief mention of that in the news release. We knew that there were areas to the north. So we've kind of tested the southern flank of the east zone here. So there are targets to the north as well that are going to get a little bit of drilling. As you can see, this pattern sort of suggests that this thing runs southwest to northeast. We needed a few more holes on the northeast. There's very little drilling out there to the northeast, despite the suggestion that there should be more. So our followers will see some drilling off to the northeast. And you don't have to go very far west, Corey, from this slide, from this figure in the news release to get to what we believe is an important crossing structure. And then on the other side of that was the northeast zone, where we drilled some very high grade and nice intercepts. So we've also pushed the drilling down into that area to test that cross structure, kind of looking for it because it's in a covered area there. And then we expect to get some more holes around that northeast zone. We haven't been back there since we learned so much more about the controls here at the east zone. So we expect to learn from that and be able to make better use of our drill meters now when we go back to the northeast zone. So for the near term, we'll see some results from the north and both sides to the northeast and southwest from the area shown in Figure 1. And then beyond that, we're testing targets on the Sarvi property right now, and we'll be back later in the winter to return to Mustajärvi again. And probably something like hole 1, we'll see some follow-up. Obviously, that was a pleasant surprise for us, just how robust that upper interval is.
So, Patrick, it really sounds like this drill program, you are still spreading out the meters here. You have a couple areas of focus, and then also on your other project. When will you come to a point where you need to focus on maybe one area, drill out that area more to build a resource?
It's a good question, and you're always factoring that in. And we have signaled in our last news release on the back of the successful financing that it is time to advance this to systematic drilling that will lead to a resource. I think this builds the case for that, Corey. What we wanted to show was growth. Is the East Zone still growing? The answer is emphatically yes. We want to understand the controls on that. We use geophysics and drilling and lots of structural measurements. We've got structural geologists in the core facility right now taking a lot of measurements and figuring out these things, these loads in great detail, Corey. That'll help us target more accurately. So we've always thought that once we get to the beginning of the year, we will be at a phase in the program where we've got enough data to start saying, okay, let's get some systematic infill. And just sort of spitballing, looking forward, Corey, I would say that if one looks at the map and starts to tie in the East Zone to the Northeast Zone, back to the west here a little bit, that we will see the degree of continuity and the sort of multiple intercepts and multiple loads that can tie those things together and make this a resource growing in the right direction, shall we say. So I would say in early 2026, Corey, there'll be a bit of a shifting of gears to filling in, putting this data into a grid form that will facilitate a proper resource delineation program. And by all means, we'll be getting several news releases out between now and then to keep folks apprised of the progress towards that.
All right. Well, still, again, a lot of drill results at the assay labs and still a lot more drilling, more than half the program still to drill heading into next year. So, Patrick, thanks for coming on the show to address these first round of drill results. And everyone listening, look at the figures in the show notes and also click the link in the show notes to visit the FireFox Gold website to read over that full news release. Patrick, thank you very much for the update, and please keep me up to date, especially on the back of further drill results.
Thank you, Corey. See you next time.